Hello, 'tis I, talking about another terrible book. Hi, my name's Rachel, and the book we're talking about today is Silkfire by Zabe Allure. I think that's how you say his name, but I don't know for sure. This is another episode of Does It Deserve 1 Star? Which in this case, it does. This book got review bombed. The author is facing criticisms of Orientalism and lesbophobia and kind of being a dick to reviewers. I'm not here to get into that. If you want to get into that, it's all over Twitter. I'm just here to determine whether or not the book that got review bombed, whether or not it deserved 1 star, which again, it did. Okay, here's the thing. I read this book for 16 days. I could not take it anymore. I could not take it anymore. I don't typically do DNF reviews. This is a DNF review. I read 64% of this book and I wished to God that I don't believe in, that I no longer had eyeballs with which to see this book. I physically could not make myself read it any longer, so I DNF'd at 64%. Let's start with the synopsis before I get into it. This is one of those books that you read the synopsis and you think, yeah, I'd read that, and then as soon as you click away from Goodreads, you completely forget what the synopsis was. And there's a reason for that. It's because nothing makes any fucking sense. Here we go. Set in a planet-sized matriarchal city where magic and technology freely bleed together, a male courtesan's quest for vengeance against his aristocrat father draws him into an ancient struggle between dragons, necromancers, and his home district's violent history. In the world-sized city of Jadzia, I'm probably saying that wrong, I do not care. Magic and ancient science merge into something dark and wondrous. Kore's life is consumed by power, politics, sex, and vengeance. And as a courtesan to the wealthy and powerful, he is privy to all manner of secrets. Is he? Somebody who read 64% of the book says doubt it. He knows meddling in politics is dangerous. Still, he is willing to risk everything to stop his father from seizing the imperial throne of the war district. But Kore soon finds that the corruption runs far deeper than just one man. During a tryst in an ancient tomb. A tryst. Oh wow, that's not how I would describe that scene of the book. Tryst really undersells the what the fuck of what happened in that scene. One word truly could not describe what happened in that scene. I'll get there. Where was I? Oh, a tryst. During a tryst in an ancient tomb, in the pursuit of political influence, Kore encounters a dying god who imbues him with the powers of one of the city's sacred dragons. Suddenly, Kore finds himself a hunted man, threatened with becoming a pawn by whoever finds him first. If the wrong person discovers his secret and lays claim to his powers, they would plunge their world into war, unleash untold horrors, and destroy the city and the 2 people he has come to love. I just want to remind you again, you may have forgotten, but when he says city, he means an entire fucking planet. Why? I don't know. This book has no reason being as pretentious as it was. It reminds me of those TikToks by that guy who takes requests and then mansplains to you or one-ups you. If you don't know who I'm talking about, I will link him down below. It's hilarious because he nails what it's like to sit in a conversation with somebody who always feels like they know way more than you do, and they love that. It is exhausting to read a book that takes itself this seriously, yet is this bad. The general idea, when you don't look at the Goodreads synopsis, the general idea is pretty easy to understand. We're on a planet that's referred to as a city planet. This planet is made up of districts. How many? I don't know. What are they called? I don't know. I know a couple of them. There's the engineering district, there's the war district where most of our book takes place. Beyond that, there's like a lost district, and I don't know what else. Districts are broken up into streets. So district, street, city, planet, none of those words mean what they mean in real life. So he has already redefined 4 words in the synopsis and then in the book, and you're left to figure that out for yourself. Each district had a god, and the gods were dragons, but they could shapeshift into people. Those gods are dead now. Each district is run by a judge, and the throne is held by that judge. This is a matriarchy, so typically it's held by a woman. And there's something called essence, which is in essence a magic that makes people bright. And by bright, this book means literally as in shiny, but then also bright is used to describe these extra magical powers you get. Being able to have strength and jump really far. Those are things that are enhanced by brightness. And people who don't use brightness are called dulls. And then there's the boring ass politics surrounding the judgeship, which not all political intrigue is boring, but it certainly is in Silkfire. Our main character is the extremely self-loathing Korishiza Brightstar. He basically starts the book hating his dad and pining for his ex and talking about how he wants to put somebody else in political power. Those are like the three things that make up the entirety of his personality. We open up, Korey's at a wedding where he is a escort to someone and he is spit on by the father of the bride and called a whore. It really sets the tone for the rest of the book. And then he's like, oh shit, hey, there's that lady that I want to put in power for the judgeship. I don't want my dad being in power because my dad's a dick. So he's like, I'm going to go up to her and I'm going to ask to be her campaign manager even though I have absolutely no experience and no plan. So even in a fictional matriarchy, men have the audacity. The entire book actually is him never ever having a plan. He never has a plan, but just fumbling around in the dark being like, somebody do something, my dad is a dick. I'll do it, but I'm not actually qualified for anything and I have no plan. But I really want to get it done myself. Despite saying he's a courtesan who deals in secrets, this is said in the synopsis and this is said in his internal monologue, which is terrible by the way, that never actually happens. At least not to 64% of the book where I got, and the plot has already popped off. The plot. Which is such a fucking waste because one of the things I loved about Inej Gaffa is that she started as a sex worker, and because she was so good in dealing in secrets and sneaking around, she got picked up by Kaz Brekker. And that's why Inej Gaffa is such an interesting character, because originally her ability to use that line of work that she was forced into, but nonetheless that line of work, to be so fucking sneaky and deal in information like that was brilliant. It's just such a fucking waste in this book. He never formulates a plan, he's not smart, he's just self-loathing and hates his dad, and he's like, well, I could, I don't know, do something. Okay, what? Do anything. Literally do one thing. Not long after he is told, you're gonna need more experience by the woman that he wants to put into power, and he comes to find out that by experience she meant that she wanted to fuck him. So instead of like sending him on some sort of like quest to gather information for her to show that he could in fact do what he says as a courtesan and is deal in information, she's just like, no, I want to fuck you and then you can have the job. But she didn't say it directly to him. He finds out that she meant that by proxy. It's so stupid. Not long after this, the Lost District shows up. There's a parade. Korey and his fellow courtesans, he runs a brothel. They are going about and looking for clientele, and he goes to a regular client, and this dude and him go off to find a temple of a dead god, and on the way there is the worst blowjob scene I've ever read. And then they're like falling through rubble. They're like falling through fucking floors. They're wading through like old mucky water. And somehow they're still fucking horny? I don't understand. Like, they're not even fazed by the fact that they have just fallen through floors into these like this like old dilapidated god's shrine. But I don't understand this scene at all. And then Korey's like, oh, I feel like I'm being watched while he's getting boned, and he's like, oh, we're on this god's temple and this god is like trying to communicate with me. And then suddenly Korey, while getting boned, the god chooses Korey to be the vessel of a dragon, and then while this ends, he orgasms all over the god's temple. So that's a thing that happened. Y'all are literally falling through floors and being like, let's not acknowledge that, let's just bone. And then a god like takes, and then while you're having sex, apparently like your essence can be stolen. So the dude like takes all of Korey's essence and then just dips. And Korey's like, wow, it's gonna be really difficult to get out of this like catacomb. Yeah, you fucking think? You fucking weirdo. What is happening? Oh look, I just came and became a god at the same time. What? What? What ensues is some of the worst writing that I have ever had to deal with. If I didn't have migraines already, this book would have given me one. The author obviously does not think that readers are worth writing for. He just slapped a bunch of shit down that only makes sense to him and then glued it together and was like, here you go. If you don't get it, I don't care. And then like tut-tuts everybody. Tut-tut. What? Rachel, what are you doing? He like, you know, pities everybody who doesn't get it. Like, maybe it's just bad. Maybe the fever dream you just glued together is just nonsense. In fact, that is exactly how I would describe this book. I would describe this book as this man, you know when you have a dream, and in the dream you get a really great idea and you're like, wow, this is a great idea. I don't want to forget this. And you're like in that half awake, half dreaming stage. So you like grab your phone and you write down what you remember about the dream and then you go back to sleep. And then the next day you're like, oh shit, I had a great idea in my dream last night. I don't remember what it was. Thankfully, I, smarty pants, decided to write it down in my journal phone. So then the next day you go to your notes app and it says something like soft pretzel snuggles with a pine cone and they're hiding inside of a grocery store that's also a volcano. And you're like, what? And suddenly it occurs to you, wow, that genius idea I had is actually fucking gibberish. That's this whole book, except the author looked at that gibberish and said, wow, this gibberish is fucking genius. And then he wrote a whole ass book of gibberish. The author said so many things that made me think, what the fuck is that supposed to mean? And in a normal fantasy, you expect to have those things eventually explained throughout the text, either in dialogue or picking up on context clues. But this book is so pretentious, it just expects you to know what those are and never attempts to explain them to you. For instance, there was a line that said, be as tiresome as you wish, Korishiza, you'll never bore these beacons to burn bright. What? And then it never explained what the fuck that was supposed to mean. To be honest, I'm not even convinced that this author decided on what half of this shit is supposed to mean. Despite him saying, oh, it's supposed to be like 90s fantasy, so it might not be for everybody. Okay, The Witcher is from the 90s and it makes sense to me. Like, maybe the problem is you. But I'm kind of convinced that it was not supposed to make sense just so it can feel superior and give you the feeling that it's just out of your fucking league. That's exactly what I mean when I call it pretentious. And why the fuck are there dinosaurs in this? By the way, it's only like certain dinosaurs, so like Brontosaurus and raptors. And then he would keep comparing things to a Bronto, and I'm like, first of all, sir, I went to Christian school, and in Christian school they don't teach you much about dinosaurs because if they did, then it would disprove the theory of creationism. So the problem is, I don't know how fucking big a Brontosaurus is, and let me know if you didn't grow up in creationism Christian schools and you do know how big a Brontosaurus is, because I certainly fucking don't. I don't know what you mean when you say it's as big as a Bronto. What does that mean? Does that mean it's as big as a Volkswagen Beetle, or does that mean it's as big as a fucking aircraft carrier? I don't know. And in theory, I should like this book. I should like it because it's queer, and it's got other things that I really love. So one of the things I love in books is polyamory rep. I loved it in The Ravenous Dark. I loved it in Iron Widow. I love poly rep. I love it. And then this book had it and I was like, I don't fucking care. And then it also had one of my favorite things that does not exist in real life, but oh, but if it could. Listen, two of my favorite magics are shadow magic and necromancy, death magic. I fucking love that shit. But it makes no goddamn sense in this book because first of all, how does the necromancy happen before somebody is dead? That doesn't make any fucking sense. That does not make any sense. And of course the shadows are part of the necromancy. Let me read a part of this book to you because this is actually where I DNF'd, because I was like, oh, if I continue reading this, I'm actually gonna hate shadow magic and necromancy, and I just cannot have that. So here we have a scene where Kore and some of the engineers who are fire weavers, God help me if I could try to tell you what a fire weaver is. I don't fucking know. It was never really explained. So the fire weavers and Kore are fighting against the necromancers. This guy says, ready your dragon's fire, essence erases shadow, make the dead stay dead, helps the living resist. But then, like a few paragraphs later, it says, don't let the shadow turn your essence. Wait, so which is it? Does the shadow turn essence, or does essence erase shadow? Which one is it? Another thing that does not make any sense to me. Pure murder juice seeps up from the planet's foundations. Murder what? I'm confused. But that's the thing is, I feel like I was supposed to be confused. I feel like this was written so that I would be confused. How are you gonna give me a conflicting magic system, not explain it, a complex magic system rather, not explain it, give me conflicting information. Other things that do not make sense, there were weird descriptions like heat prickled inside my thigh, faint but insistent like a lizard's footsteps. Huh? Another one, this was just, I could not stop laughing at this. What had happened under the archive? The archive was on top of the old god's temple where while Korishize literally came on the god's altar, the god came into him and gave him the dragon, I guess. What had happened under the archive would roll off me like mist evaporating from hot garbage at noon. What? A skirt of cream-colored silk, cloth of aluminum rays slicing the front into wedges of stylized armor, my silver bracers inlaid with electrum starbursts. That is how the clothing is described. I don't know what the fuck any of that means except maybe skirt and armor. The rest of it is a what? And all of the clothing is like that. They're all called things that I have no idea what he's talking about. He never describes what he's talking about. It's ridiculous. Another thing that doesn't make sense is that when Kore reveals to one of his two love interests that he's a dragon, she says, "Shit, fuck, you're a dragon." He says, "I know, I'm sorry. What else could I say? I could give you a list if that would help." Another thing that doesn't make sense, and this is extremely petty of me, but I just don't like this at all. Servers poured lime and pomegranate soup, gas hissing from the dry ice beads that cooled it. Why do you need to cool down a smoothie? I don't get it. I don't understand. Now let's talk about the matriarchy in this book, which was, out of all the things, this was the most annoying thing to me. In a TikTok, the author says, "To the people mad at me for creating matriarchal fantasy where privileged women sometimes creep on men, the idea that women are too pure and good to ever hurt someone is actually really fucked up because it removes the ability for women to be human and have control over their own decisions." Oh boy. Okay, where do I even start? Let's start by giving you an idea of what the misandry and the matriarchy looks like in this book, shall we? Homosexual affairs weren't illegal but frowned upon as a waste of essence. So you're supposed to give your essence to your wife and your children so that they can thrive if you're a dude. I've done everything for my wife. Oh wait. Happiness meant nothing when propriety demanded one raise children and pass on their store of essence. I've done everything for my wife, Joshua said. I built our salvage company. I raised our child. I won't be slut-shamed by some dull. So slut-shaming is a thing to men. I'm fine, I spat. Too aggressive, too angry. Ugly traits in man, even in a boss. Be soft. If I spoke to reassure him, tears would spill within my words. No one respected a crying man. Wearing a condom tells your wife you don't trust her to choose wisely when to conceive. You're poisoning your marriage. If she rips it off, blame your own selfishness. Sexual Education for Boys, Armory Street Civic University Press. Another thing that's super pretentious about this book is all these excerpts that you get from random books and songs and different things at the front of chapters that typically have absolutely no context available to the reader to figure out, first of all, what the fuck they are and how they have to do with the chapter you're reading about. Which sucks because I love books within books. I love book excerpts within books. So the fact that he took something that I like and made it shitty is annoying. If I'd been a more dutiful boy, my mother would still be alive, and maybe my father would have spared us if I'd presented a sweet face to him 16 years ago instead of the scheming smirk of his true heir. The hormone testosterone makes men moody and prone to discord. This is evolution's design to keep boys from wasting essence among themselves. As puberty can be lonely, young boys are encouraged to keep cats instead of risking improper friendship with other boys. Sexual Education for Boys, Armory Street University Press. And then there's like infighting among men. So here's Kore's brother talking to him. I'm the judge's son. You're a whore who eats ass for breakfast. There's no true kinship between us. A whore who eats ass. Oh my god. And then his response was, I'm hotter than you. smarter than you, brighter than you, and your wife enjoyed fucking me, grow some tits and give me a straight answer. But you'll consider Akizeki for my rightful place a sexist. If I'm sexist, Akizeki said, why is Korishiza on my advisory committee? I thought he was your whore. The last thing I want is a violent man on the throne of war. But you'll take a violent woman, Zega said. So that gives you an idea of some of the ways men are treated and also treat each other under matriarchy in Silkfire. I don't have an issue with the matriarchy because of why this author thinks I do. It's what he thinks that I have an issue with is a straw man argument. My actual issue is, if you're going to tackle the subject of what if a matriarchy, you have to take a lot of care in doing so, and you will find it hard for anyone to do this correctly. Literally anybody. And you would find it hard to do for the same reason that you would find it hard to find a good book that is a gender plague book. It's a very difficult subject to tackle because sex and gender, the way that they interact with each other, the way that patriarchy works, these are very nuanced topics with a lot of interconnecting issues. You cannot go about it in a simplistic way, and that is how Silkfire approached this. It also just exhibits a grave misunderstanding of what patriarchy is and how it works, and also how it is upheld. And yes, I know that the author is a trans man, I know, and thank you to his friend who decided to go off on a tangent and tell us all of these things, I know. But the thing is, anybody can write a matriarchy badly. You can misunderstand patriarchy and misogyny and sexism even if you experience them. Experience does not always equal a full understanding. Experience doesn't even always mean that someone will be against misogyny. I mean, women living under fundamentalist Christianity, for example, experience misogyny, but they also uphold misogyny. Internalized misogyny exists. Even I don't know all the ways that patriarchy presents. I am still learning about it every single day. It is for those reasons that you simply cannot take patriarchy and just swap it with matriarchy and say, see, look, women do bad thing too. There is an opportunity to explore fictional matriarchy and do it right. No one has done so that I have seen because it's very complicated. Understanding gender and how gender in our society, particularly in, Western culture, the United States, how it came to be, takes a lot more research beyond personal experience and beyond just looking around you at the scope of things today. You have to take into consideration historical context. You cannot divorce gender today from how gender today came to be. And if you are to create a matriarchy, you have to create an entire history that would explain how this matriarchy came to be, how it is upheld, who it is upheld by, and why. And you would have to see how that alternate history plays into how gender exists in that fictional world. That's a lot of work. The argument against patriarchy is not men bad and women good, so therefore we should put women in charge. That's not it at all. In fact, patriarchy is not even synonymous with men, nor is it solely about gender. Viewing it in this way ignores the ways that everybody, including women, uphold patriarchy and perpetuate it themselves. Bell Hooks actually has a great book on this about masculinity called Men and Masculinity, The Will to Change, and she talks in depth about how mothers of sons perpetuate patriarchy by trying to toughen up their sons, because when men and boys are only valued if they are seen as strong, and therefore society encourages men and boys to cut themselves off from their emotions early on in life. And who does this most but their mothers? And as I said, historical context is key in understanding how patriarchy plays out today. A matriarchy simply could not exist the same as patriarchy does today. You cannot just swap them and expect the exact same result. That's at a minimum lazy, and also it's just wrong. Think of it sort of like this. You go back in time, you pick out one of your 8 great-grandparents. You might not even know all of your great-grandparents' names. That's how disconnected you are from them. You go back in time and you pick one of 8 of your great-grandparents and you swap them out. You might think, because you are so disconnected from your own history, as many of us are, that this would not play play a huge role in changing who you are today. You would be wrong. That single piece of historical context is going to change the very shape of who you are today. We could also use an analogy like racism in the United States, how it presents particularly in the United States. Today's racism in the United States is formed by its historical context. If you were to change who colonized what is now the United States, you would see a different version of this country and a different version of the racism that is present today. And that is because the historical context is key to understanding what is now in existence. I'm not saying it would change for like better nor for worse, I'm just saying it would be different. You cannot just simply swap in someone else and expect the same result, and I would say the same thing for this book. And again, patriarchy is not about men, and what I mean when I say that is that patriarchy is really a hierarchy. It is a dominating hierarchy that places a certain kind of person on a pedestal above everybody else. In our context, that person is a straight, white, cis man. But also, he is conventionally attractive. He is also able-bodied. He is also thin, etc., etc., etc. There's a whole bunch of intersects that come into play here, and this book drastically failed to acknowledge that point. All it said was, hey look, women bad too, they do same thing as man, see? No, look at them being human and do bad things. Like, this is ridiculous. It just makes you think that the author just wanted to write a book where women were doing bad things, and it's like, you didn't really want to flesh out a matriarchy, you just wanted to show women being shitty. So I kind of understand why the author is being called a misogynist. And I haven't even mentioned the fact that real life matriarchies exist and health outcomes are better for them, and the children are still raised by the women. And anyway, I could go on and on. There's so much more I could say. I haven't even touched on the sexual assault scene, which was honestly only written so that you'd further pity the main character, which felt extremely manipulative and weird. There's just nothing good about this book. Out of 64%, all of it made me want to eat my own eyeballs instead of reading more. I hated it. So yes, it deserved 1 star. I don't care that it's getting 1-star bombed because it's bad, and I would not wish this on my worst enemy, Gwyneth Paltrow. You know what you did. Alright, leave your thoughts below on Silkfire. If you want to support the channel, like, subscribe, Ko-fi account is linked below. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye!